Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on these African nightcrawler systems in the yellow buckets. Got a couple bits of info about them that I wanted to share with you before we get started. The systems are now 322 days of age. That's, how many? 46 weeks. And bucket number one here was getting regular feedings while bucket number two was set up on a set it and forget it test. And that's the reason the count on how many feedings they've received is different. And 13 days have gone by since the last time we checked in on these bins to feed them. And I believe it was at the last check-in that we decided that it was no longer necessary to operate the fan that was blowing air down into these systems to help dry them. The systems did finally feel like they were the right moisture level. So I did do a little something down in here, which was just to put a piece of newspaper to cover up the contents, because I, felt like they were already dried off sufficiently and that it wasn't really necessary for them to dry any further. So I figured let's let them preserve what little moisture, well, I don't know if little is the right way to think about it, but what moisture they have in them at the present time already, because no further drying seemed necessary. So let's get to work on feeding these little guys. I really like the idea I got from one of the viewers, which was to screen the material, even though it might be a little bit clumpy and there might be a good many little clumps of material that would still remain in clumps in the process and not get screened out as part of the harvest of the castings. And then take those things that did get caught in the screen, the little boulders, and use that material to launch off a new system with these little guys. And in doing so, we will have pretty much eliminated or gotten a good amount of the finished castings that these systems are made up of out of the way by harvesting them. And I thought that I might actually follow through with that, but I wasn't quite sure if these systems were really ready for that in terms of harvest readiness. Is the material all flowing well enough that it could happen? Naturally, I think we are still expecting that there's going to be chunks like this that still hold together because they're overly damp. Or, maybe I can actually break some of them apart into smaller bits so that at some point in the near future, when the time comes to give that a try, if that's the way we play it, if we try to screen this material, then perhaps by breaking up some of these little boulders, we can ensure that more of it would end up getting harvested rather than just remaining as boulders and moving with the worms into their new home with all those overs, if you want to call them that. I've heard a few people referring to the overs as the material that gets caught in the screen, oversized bits of stuff that doesn't pass through the screen and qualify as harvested castings. So even though a certain amount of this stuff still feels like it's kind of holding together due to moisture, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to break it apart and help it crumble. And I'm sure just by moving some of the more damp stuff that's down low up further to the surface and then submerging some of the drier stuff on the surface down to be with the more damp material, we'll end up with drier stuff overall. And the feeding that I'm giving them today is dry food as well. It's not a dry food that I think would absorb moisture into itself. It's my worm chow. So I don't think that that's the sort of thing that's going to help contribute to ongoing drying. And I don't even really know if ongoing drying is even needed, because even the things that are kind of clumpy still do feel like they can break apart into nice castings. And here and there's a little fragment of food. This here would be the stem of a banana, if I'm not mistaken. This thing over here looks like the seed from a pumpkin, which is actually in the process of germinating and trying to grow. And I assume that something like this would just get caught in the screen and go with them to their new home to get broken down over time, since it's not going to happen here. But I think we're kind of at that point now that we've had a chance to give this stuff a little bit of a stir and give it an inspection to just get a sense of how close to being ready it is for harvest. I think we can come in here with a little sprinkle of the worm chow, get these little guys fed, and then we can press on to bucket number 2. You know, after 13 days, a feeding of this nature, I doubt lasts very long. And even though there's little bits and pieces of stuff like a banana peel, or what's left of a banana peel, and other little scraps of food, I assume that at this point the worms are probably just going back to their castings and re-eating some of their castings, because most of the time when worms drop their castings, that stuff still has so much nutritional value remaining in it that that stuff can still get consumed over and over and over again. I think over half a dozen times or more before it really no longer has any more nutritional value. So I doubt that they're hungry, but I still felt like giving them some worm chow. And nothing damp. I think the moisture levels are nice in here. Let's press on to doing bucket number 2. Give it a similar quick check-in, see how things look, drop in some worm chow, size up the condition of the system in terms of its harvest readiness. Here, somehow the material seems a lot more loose and flowing and less clumpy. But I mean, that's just based on the first handful. Let's continue with sizing up the material. Yeah, for whatever reason, the material in this system feels just a little bit more smooth and flowing and less clumpy. It is interesting to see just how many worms occupy these buckets. There's a good many of them hanging out in here. And what is this? It was kind of a large object, which really just ended up being material that had clumped together. I thought I had encountered some sort of like a pumpkin stem or some large leftover food item. Over on this side, I feel like I'm still bumping into somewhat larger clumps. I doubt that any differences we see in these systems can be traced back to those times in the very, very beginning when we did do the set it and forget it test. That was just so long ago at this point that I doubt that there's really any residual differences in these systems that could be directly tied back to that activity. So here and there I just feel compelled to break up little chunks of stuff that seems to be holding together. But we don't have to go crazy. These little guys are probably just wondering, you know, oh my goodness, it feels like we just went on a roller coaster getting spun around and all that other stuff. So why don't we just go ahead and give them their fair share of yummy worm chow, which will be their, at this point, 26th feeding, and over in the older, not older, jeez. Let me start over. Over here in bucket number 2, this is now their 26th feeding. In bucket number 1, it's their 30th feeding. Both bins are the same age. And hopefully I've submerged the worm chow deep enough that it's not so close to the surface that it's going to end up being in a place that it's too dry for the worms to approach it. I mean, these composting worms do tend to hang out on the surface looking for their food, so I assume that they're going to bump into that stuff pretty quickly and be able to make a nice meal out of it. So that's our check-in now with the 322-day-old African nightcrawler yellow buckets. Looking good. I think we might be ready for harvest soon. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.